The heavy crystal of my wine glass made a sharp, echoing thud as I set it down on the glass surface of my coffee table. It was exactly 8 in the evening on a Friday. Outside my penthouse windows, the Seattle skyline was just beginning to ignite against the darkening sky, painting a picture of serene wealth and quiet success that I had fought tooth and nail to achieve. But inside, the air was suddenly thick and suffocating. My phone buzzed aggressively against the expensive leather of my sofa. The caller ID flashed a name I had actively tried to avoid for the past 3 weeks. Harrison. My father. Tomorrow was supposed to be the biggest day of my younger sister Delaney's life. Her wedding was destined to be the event of the season, a lavish, overpriced affair that my parents had been bragging about to anyone who would tolerate their endless boasting. I stared at the vibrating phone, a familiar, sickening pit forming in the very bottom of my stomach. Every interaction with them was a landmine, and I was tired of tiptoeing. I swiped right to answer, putting it on speaker. Before I could even offer a standard, polite greeting, my father's voice blasted through the room. It was devoid of any warmth, any hesitation, or any familial affection. Sloane. I am going to make this very quick, and you are going to listen to me without interrupting. His tone was the exact same condescending bark he used when reprimanding a disobedient dog or a slow waiter. You need to wire $50,000 to my bank account immediately. Tonight. If that money is not sitting in my account by tomorrow morning, consider your invitation revoked. Do not bother showing up to the venue. You will be turned away by security at the door. I sat there, frozen in place. The chill from the air conditioning suddenly felt like ice against my skin. Through the speaker, I could hear my mother, Daphne, muttering something in the background. Her voice dripped with that signature venom I knew so well. Then my father spoke the words that felt like a physical, brutal punch to my chest. You owe us this for being such a massive disappointment all these years. This family has carried the weight of your failures for long enough. Pay up and contribute for once in your miserable life, or you are no longer family. The line went dead. The silence in my massive apartment was deafening, ringing in my ears like the aftermath of an explosion. $50,000. The demand was so absurd, so entirely unhinged and brutally cruel, that for a long, agonizing moment, I forgot how to breathe. My vision blurred as a very specific, deeply buried memory slammed into me with the force of a runaway freight train. 8 years ago. I was 24 years old, standing in the middle of their immaculate, marble-clad suburban kitchen. My hands were shaking as I held a meticulously researched, heavily detailed business plan. I had literally begged them, tears streaming down my face, to co-sign a loan for $50,000 so I could buy my very first business. I wasn't asking for a handout. I was asking for a signature. They had laughed right in my face. My father had snatched the binder from my hands and tossed my business plan directly into the trash can, telling me he refused to throw away good money on a garbage idea from a girl who could not even keep a basic corporate entry-level job. He told me I was delusional. 3 days later, a brand-new, silver Mercedes-Benz pulled into our driveway with a giant red bow on the hood. A graduation gift for Delaney for barely scraping by with a communications degree she never even planned to use. The exact price tag on that car? $50,000. A cold, hard knot of pure, unadulterated anger began to tighten in my chest, squeezing the breath from my lungs. The audacity. The sheer, terrifying audacity to demand the exact sum they had so callously denied me, holding my presence at my only sister's wedding hostage like a cheap ransom. My hands stopped shaking. The tears that had threatened to fall dried up instantly, replaced by a burning, furious clarity that made my blood run hot. I picked up my phone and tossed it aside. I did not cry. I did not scream. I stood up, smoothed down the front of my silk trousers, and walked over to my home office. I woke up my laptop, the screen illuminating my face with a soft, clinical blue glow. I logged into the secure, encrypted network. I opened the master database for Gallagher Logistics and Events. I typed in the search bar, Delaney and Carter Wedding. The system instantly populated the screen with pages of vendor agreements, floral invoices, and high-end catering menus. I stared at the blinking cursor, a dark, humorless smile spreading across my face. They really thought they held all the cards. They really thought they could exile me from the family over a desperate shakedown for cash. They had no earthly idea who they had just threatened. They had no idea who owned the very ground they planned to walk on tomorrow. Would they actually go through with barring me at the door if I showed up empty-handed? To truly understand why that specific phone call shattered whatever fragile, fraying thread still connected me to my blood relatives, you have to understand the museum of pain I had been quietly living in for 3 decades. I was the invisible child. No, that is far too generous a term. I was the designated scapegoat. The emotional punching bag. The one whose mere existence seemed to inexplicably irritate my parents to their very core. If Delaney brought home a mediocre B- on a history test, she was showered with praise for trying her absolute best and taken out for expensive ice cream sundaes. If I brought home a flawless report card full of straight A's, I was sternly told not to show off, or asked why I didn't spend that wasted energy helping my struggling sister study. I remember being 12 years old, sitting quietly in my room reading a novel, when Delaney accidentally knocked over my mother's favorite antique porcelain vase in the upstairs hallway. It shattered into 100 jagged pieces. When my mother heard the crash and came running, she did not even ask what happened. She took one look at Delaney's fake tears, marched into my room, dragged me out by my ear, and grounded me for a month. Her reasoning? She claimed I had left my shoes in the hallway and Delaney had tripped over them. I had not worn those shoes in weeks, and they were neatly tucked in my closet. The truth didn't matter. The narrative did. This deeply toxic dynamic only accelerated and worsened as we got older. When I made the terrifying decision to skip the traditional, safe corporate route after college to start my own path, their disdain morphed into open, cruel mockery. They started calling me the laundry lady. That became their favorite, hilarious inside joke at every extended family dinner. Oh, look, the laundry lady is here. Better hide your dirty socks. It was endlessly amusing to them. But the harsh reality was that my garbage idea was buying a failing, run-down, heavily indebted industrial laundromat in a terrible, unsafe part of town. It constantly smelled of harsh industrial bleach, damp cotton, and rusted metal. I worked brutal 18-hour days. I slept on a lumpy, stained cot in the back office, shivering in the winter. I hauled massive, heavy carts of wet, tangled linens until the skin on my hands cracked and bled, and my back spasmed with agonizing pain. I was washing cheap tablecloths and greasy napkins for low-end diners just to keep the electricity on and pay my meager staff. I was exhausted to my very bones. I vividly remember one specific Thanksgiving dinner 4 years ago. I had come straight to my parents' house from the laundromat because a massive commercial boiler had broken down, and I had to fix the valve myself to avoid a ruinous emergency repair bill. I was dead on my feet, smelling faintly of cheap detergent and machine grease, my hair pulled back in a messy knot. My Aunt Gemma, my mother's older sister and her chief flying monkey, took one look at me as I walked through the door and literally wrinkled her nose in dramatic disgust. She loudly asked, across a room full of guests, if I had forgotten how to use a shower. She added that it was deeply embarrassing for the family to have me show up looking like a homeless shelter reject, especially while Delaney sat across the table dripping in designer jewelry my parents had just bought her for no reason at all. The entire table erupted in laughter. My father chuckled, sipping his wine. My mother looked at me with an expression of pure, unadulterated shame. But then Uncle Beckett spoke up. He was my mother's younger brother, considered the black sheep of the family because he had moved to the West Coast and worked with his hands as a custom carpenter. He set down his heavy silver fork, the sharp clinking sound instantly silencing the cruel laughter around the table. He looked right at me with kind, tired eyes, then turned and glared daggers at Aunt Gemma. "Leave the kid alone," he said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. "The smell of honest, hard labor is the best smell in the world. It is the smell of someone actually building a real life instead of leeching off someone else's wallet." He raised his water glass to me in a silent toast. That single, small act of validation was the only thing that kept me from walking out the front door and never, ever looking back. It was the only proof I had that I was not crazy. I was not the problem. They were. Now, sitting alone in my silent penthouse, I looked at the framed family photo sitting on my mahogany desk. It was taken last Christmas. My parents, Delaney, and Aunt Gemma, all smiling brightly with perfectly white teeth in front of a massive, heavily decorated tree. I was not in the picture. I had been relegated to the kitchen, sweating over the stove cooking their elaborate holiday meal, because my mother told me my outfit did not match the specific color scheme she wanted for the professional photographer. For years, I had swallowed my pride. I had absorbed their endless insults and slights, because I desperately, pathetically wanted a family. I wanted them to wake up one day, see my hard work, and realize I was worth loving. But as I stared at those smiling, fake faces in the photo, the realization hit me like a bucket of freezing ice water. My silence and endurance had not bought their love. It had only subsidized their cruelty. By tolerating their abuse for so long, I had actively enabled their endless greed. Was there truly any limit to what they would take from me if I continued to let them? They loved to call me the laundry lady. In their minds, they thought I was still scrubbing stubborn grease stains out of cheap polyester uniforms in a windowless room. They never bothered to ask how I could afford the tailored designer clothes I occasionally wore, or the sleek Porsche Panamera I drove, or why my schedule was always packed with high-stakes meetings. They never asked a single question about my life, so I never offered them the truth. I never told them that the rundown laundromat was just the very first stepping stone. I had flipped that business for a massive profit, used the capital to buy a struggling, mid-tier catering company, completely overhauled their operations, turned it around, and just kept going. I bought out competitors. I acquired logistics fleets. Today, at 32 years old, I was the sole owner and CEO of Gallagher Logistics and Events. It was not just a business, it was a sprawling empire. I owned a massive fleet of luxury transport vehicles, the largest and most exclusive high-end catering service in the entire city of Seattle, and a crown jewel portfolio of 5 premium, highly sought-after event spaces. The most famous and breathtaking of those spaces was the Glass House Conservatory. It was a sprawling, magnificent architectural marvel of dark steel and imported, crystal-clear glass, surrounded by acres of meticulously manicured botanical gardens. It was the venue everyone who was anyone wanted to book. The current market valuation of my holding company sat comfortably at $120 million. I had built every single inch of it from nothing. No cosign loans from my parents. No trust funds. No handouts. Just blood, sweat, and a ruthless, unwavering work ethic that kept me awake when everyone else was sleeping. And tomorrow morning, Delaney was supposed to get married at the Glass House Conservatory, my venue. She would be eating food prepared by my catering staff. She would be surrounded by my floral arrangements. They had booked the entire package through a third-party wedding planner, completely and utterly unaware that the parent company that owned all these vendors belonged to the very daughter they so deeply despised. I had actually planned to tell them the truth this weekend. I really did. Against my better judgment, I had intended to use this lavish wedding reception as a quiet, definitive olive branch. I was finally going to introduce them to my fiancé, a brilliant, soft-spoken architect who treated me like absolute gold and grounded me in ways I never thought possible. Furthermore, I was planning to quietly pay off the massive remaining balance of the wedding as a surprise wedding gift. I had even gone into the back-end system 2 days ago and secretly authorized a massive, free upgrade for the floral arrangements. I personally instructed the design team to swap out the standard, basic roses Delaney had chosen for rare, imported white orchids. It was a $20,000 upgrade, completely on the house, listed discreetly in the planner's file simply as a vendor courtesy upgrade to enhance portfolio aesthetic. I wanted her to have a beautiful day. I picked up my phone again, the screen cool against my fingers, and opened the Facebook app. I do not know exactly why I did it in that moment. Maybe I just needed to twist the knife in my own heart one last time to kill whatever lingering affection I had left. At the very top of my newsfeed was a live video Delaney had posted barely an hour ago from her luxury hotel bridal suite. I tapped the screen, unmuting the video. There she was, wearing a glowing, expensive gold facial mask, holding a crystal glass of expensive champagne. She was giggling, practically vibrating with smug excitement, talking to her meager followers about how stressed she was, but how incredibly perfect everything was going to be. You guys, she squealed right into the camera lens, waving her freshly manicured hand to show off her diamond ring. The venue manager just called my planner. They upgraded all my floral arrangements to these insanely gorgeous, imported orchids for free. Like $20,000 worth of exotic flowers, totally for free. The coordinator said it is because I am such a high-profile VIP client and my personal aesthetic is just so perfect for their luxury brand image. Can you believe it? I felt my jaw clench so hard my teeth ached. High-profile VIP client. She had barely 3,000 followers on Instagram, most of them bots. But her delusion wasn't even the worst part. I scrolled down to look at the live comments rolling in on the video. Right there, pinned near the top by Delaney herself, was a comment from my mother, Daphne. I read the words, letting them burn into my retinas. So incredibly happy for my beautiful girl. You deserve the absolute best the world has to offer. Thank God we made the tough decision not to invite your cheap, pathetic sister to the rehearsal dinner tonight. She would probably show up smelling like industrial soap and completely ruin the whole high-class vibe of those expensive flowers. We won't let her ruin tomorrow either. Love you, sweetie. I stared at the glowing screen for a long, quiet minute. The words blurred slightly as a fresh, dark wave of rage washed over my entire body. I had given them a $20,000 gift out of the quiet goodness of my heart, desperately hoping to make my sister's special day magical. And their immediate response was to use the existence of that very gift as a weapon to mock my perceived poverty, a poverty that did not even exist. They were not just a toxic family. They were maliciously, gleefully cruel people. They actively fed on my perceived misery and failure to inflate their own fragile egos. The olive branch I had been carefully holding out snapped cleanly in half, turning into jagged splinters. There would be no heartfelt introductions tomorrow. There would be no generous peace offerings. I closed the laptop with a soft click, the screen going black, reflecting my own cold, emotionless expression in the glass. The hopeful, desperate girl who wanted her parents' approval was officially dead. The question now was, how far were they willing to push the laundry lady before she finally pushed back? The burning anger inside me was no longer a hot, blinding fire that made me want to scream or throw things. It had rapidly cooled and settled into something much, much more dangerous. A cold, calculating, surgical precision. Something about my father's aggressive demand for exactly $50,000 kept echoing in the back of my mind. It was entirely too specific. My parents were wealthy on paper, yes, but I knew they lived well beyond their actual means, constantly drowning in credit to keep up appearances with their snooty country club friends. Why would they desperately need that exact amount of liquid cash in less than 12 hours, and why tie it so aggressively to my wedding attendance? I opened my laptop again, my fingers flying over the keyboard. I bypassed the standard employee user interface and logged directly into the secure, heavily encrypted financial backend of Gallagher Logistics. If there was one thing I demanded in my empire, it was flawless, meticulous record-keeping. I pulled up the master financial ledger for the Gallagher and Thompson wedding account. I quickly scanned the long history of deposits and scheduled payments. The total contracted cost of the premium wedding package was $150,000. According to the detailed notes left by the sales team, the groom's family, the Carters, had generously agreed to pay for the entire event to ease the burden on my parents. I clicked on the specific payment receipts. Exactly 3 months ago, a massive wire transfer had come in from a private banking account belonging to Carter's father for exactly $150,000. The money had been deposited into a joint escrow account managed jointly by my parents and the third-party wedding planner. But when I looked at the actual disbursements sent from that specific escrow account to my company's accounts receivable, the numbers simply did not add up. Only $100,000 had been successfully transferred to pay for the venue, food, and basic services. There was a glaring, bright red outstanding balance of exactly $50,000. The final payment deadline was set for 8 in the morning tomorrow. If that balance wasn't cleared, the automated system would immediately lock the event out, voiding the contract. My heart began to hammer a heavy, rhythmic beat against my ribs. I dug deeper, pulling up the email communication logs between our accounting department and my parents. There were 4 separate, urgent missed notices regarding the overdue balance sent over the last 2 weeks. I leaned back in my heavy leather chair, staring at the ceiling as the ugly pieces snapped together with sickening, undeniable clarity. The Carters had paid for the whole wedding up front. My parents and Delaney had direct access to that joint escrow account. They had secretly siphoned exactly $50,000 out of the wedding fund. Why? I knew Delaney had a massive, out-of-control shopping addiction. I knew she was quietly drowning in high-interest credit card debt to fund her influencer lifestyle. My parents must have illegally used the groom's wedding money to bail her out of debt, arrogantly assuming they could easily find a way to replace the missing funds before the venue's final deadline. But they had failed. They were broke, desperate, and completely out of time. If they did not pay my venue by tomorrow morning, the wedding would be halted before it even began, and infinitely worse, the wealthy Carter family would find out that their future in-laws had brazenly stolen $50,000 from them. It wasn't just a mistake. It was grand larceny. It was outright financial fraud. And their brilliant, sociopathic solution to avoid public humiliation and potential jail time was to brutally extort the missing money from their estranged, supposedly poor daughter by threatening to ruin her relationship with her sister. They were literally trying to use me as an emergency blood bank to cover up their own crimes. As if the universe itself wanted to confirm my horrific discovery, a notification popped up on the corner of my screen. It was an urgent email forwarded to me by my head of finance. It was from a man named Preston, the high-powered, terrifyingly efficient financial attorney representing the Carter family. The email was aggressively addressed to the wedding planner, demanding a final, itemized receipt showing a zero balance from the venue by tomorrow morning, strictly for tax purposes and final audit. The walls were rapidly closing in on my parents. They were cornered rats in a trap of their own making, and they had tried to bite me to chew their way out. I read Preston's email 3 times, memorizing his contact information and the aggressive tone of his legal demands. Would they truly sink so low as to let their own daughter take the agonizing emotional fall for their blatant theft? I needed to be absolutely, unequivocally sure. Before I struck the match and burned this bridge to a pile of unrecognizable ash, I needed to know, beyond a shadow of a single doubt, that there was not a shred of genuine parental love left in their dark hearts. I needed them to condemn themselves with their own cruel words. I picked up my phone, my hand remarkably steady, and dialed my parents' home landline. It rang 4 agonizing times before my mother finally picked up the receiver. "What do you want, Sloan?" "Your father already told you the terms and conditions," Daphne snapped immediately, her voice tight and high-pitched with obvious, barely contained panic. I could hear the faint, mindless chatter of a reality television show in the background and the sharp clinking of ice cubes in a glass. She was drinking. I took a breath and forced my voice to tremble. I made myself sound incredibly small, terrified, and utterly desperate. I channeled the ghost of that 24-year-old girl who had begged for a loan in their kitchen all those years ago. "Mom, please," I whimpered, making my breathing sound jagged. I checked my savings account. I don't have $50,000. I just don't have it anywhere. I am barely making rent this month at my apartment. Please, Mom. It is Delaney's wedding day. She is my only sister. If I don't have the money, are you really, truly going to ban me from coming? Even though I am your daughter? Even though we are blood?" There was a long, heavy pause on the line. For a fraction of a second, just a heartbeat, I thought I heard genuine hesitation. I thought maybe, just maybe, the horrifying reality of permanently banning her own flesh and blood from a major family milestone would crack her cold, obsessed exterior. But I was foolishly wrong. My mother let out a sharp, breathless, incredibly cruel laugh. "Blood? Don't you dare try to guilt-trip me, Sloan," she hissed, the venom dripping from every syllable. "This family has absolutely no room for ungrateful, useless failures. You have embarrassed us for years with your pathetic, dirty little laundry business and your lack of ambition. You actively drag down our image in front of our friends. If you cannot contribute to this family financially when we ask, then you serve no purpose to us whatsoever. We need that money tonight. If you don't have it, then you are worthless to me. Have I made myself perfectly clear? Have the money or disappear. We don't want you there ruining the aesthetic anyway. She slammed the phone down. The dial tone buzzed loudly in my ear like an angry, trapped hornet. I slowly pulled the phone away from my face, looking at the black screen. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel heartbroken or rejected. I felt completely, beautifully, terrifyingly free. The very last, rusted chain of guilt and obligation holding me to these horrible people shattered into a million tiny pieces, dissolving into the air. They had made their final choice. They valued their fake, fragile image and their stolen, embezzled money infinitely more than my existence. They viewed me not as a human being with feelings, but as a broken ATM they could kick and abuse when it didn't dispense cash on command. The countless tears I had shed for them over the agonizing years felt like a foolish, pathetic waste of hydration. My mother's words echoed loudly in my head, bouncing off the walls of my skull. You serve no purpose to us. You are worthless to me. Have the money or disappear. I stood up from the sofa. I walked over to the massive floor-to-ceiling window and looked out at the glittering city below. My city. My empire. I took a deep, long breath, the cool, conditioned air filling my lungs with a sudden, intoxicating rush of absolute power. They wanted to play a high-stakes game of ultimatums and extortion? Fine. But they forgot one crucial, fatal detail in their arrogant arrogance. You do not issue ultimatums to the person who owns the entire board. I was not the weak, crying, pathetic girl they firmly believed I was. I was a predator who had been politely, patiently masquerading as prey for years. I walked back to my large desk, my heels clicking sharply against the hardwood floor, and picked up my phone again. It was time to show them exactly how worthless the laundry lady really was. What kind of devastating destruction was I about to rain down on their perfect, stolen day? I looked at the sleek digital clock mounted on my office wall. 11:30 at night. I scrolled rapidly through my VIP contacts list and hit dial. The phone rang twice before a groggy, heavily confused voice answered. Sloan? Is everything okay? It is almost midnight, Quinn mumbled, her voice thick with sleep. Quinn was the general coordinator for the Glass House Conservatory. She was sharp as a whip, fiercely loyal to me, and usually dead asleep by 10 to handle the early morning chaos of event planning. Wake up, Quinn. Sit up. Get a pen and paper. I need you completely focused right now, I said, my voice eerily calm, smooth, and utterly devoid of any human emotion. I heard rustling on the other end of the line, the sharp sound of a bedside lamp clicking on. Okay, I'm awake. What is the emergency, boss? Did a pipe burst? The Gallagher and Thompson wedding scheduled for tomorrow morning. Cancel it. There was a dead, heavy silence on the line. I could practically hear Quinn's brilliant brain short-circuiting in real time. Cancel it? Sloan, the ceremony starts at 10 in the morning. The catering trucks are already loaded and parked in the loading bay. The floral team just finished installing $20,000 worth of those imported white orchids you approved. The entire venue is set up and pristine. We cannot cancel it now, it's impossible. We will be sued into absolute oblivion for breach of contract. We will not be sued by anyone, I replied smoothly, sitting down in my chair. Open the master contract file for the event on your tablet. Flip to Appendix B, Section 4. Read it to me. I heard the frantic, panicked tapping of a keyboard as Quinn logged into the system from her home network. A minute later, she gasped loudly. Section 4, she read, her voice trembling slightly. The company reserves the absolute right to unilaterally terminate all services, without refund or prior notice, if the client is found to be engaging in financial fraud, embezzlement, or misuse of funds regarding the event budget. Wait. Sloan, do you have actual legal proof of this? I have the raw escrow transfer logs and a direct email from the groom's legal counsel proving the bride's family deliberately embezzled $50,000 from the wedding budget to pay off personal credit card debt, I stated coldly, listing the facts like a prosecutor. The clients are my parents and my sister, Quinn. They stole the money from the groom's family, and they just called to try and extort me to cover their tracks before the morning audit. Oh my God, Quinn whispered, the horror dawning on her. Here are your direct orders, Quinn. Call the night logistics crew immediately. Tell them to rip down every single orchid and pack them safely. Empty the kitchens of all prepared food. Pull the entire luxury transport fleet. Lock every single door to the glass house and shut down the main power grid to the grand hall. Leave nothing but empty space and bare walls. Understood. But Sloan, what do we do with all the expensive food and the delicate flowers? It is all going to spoil by tomorrow afternoon. I smiled. A real, genuine, dangerous smile. There is an event at our downtown community center tomorrow afternoon, isn't there? The charity fundraiser for the local children's orphanage. Yes, but they only booked the most basic tier package. Just finger sandwiches, water, and folding chairs. It's a very low-budget event. Not anymore, I commanded. Reroute everything. Send the entire 5-star luxury catering menu to the orphanage. Install all $20,000 worth of those orchids in their dining hall. Send the luxury transport fleet to pick up the kids from their dorms in style. Let those children, who actually have no family to rely on, experience the absolute luxury that a rotten, toxic, thieving family does not deserve. Consider it done, boss, Quinn said, her voice suddenly ringing with absolute, fierce determination. She loved a good justice crusade more than anyone I knew. One last thing, I added, leaning forward. Draft a formal, legally binding cancellation notice. Cite Section 4, Financial Fraud. Do not send it to my parents. Send it directly to the third-party wedding planner and blind copy Preston, the groom's lawyer. Let it hit their inboxes at exactly 6 in the morning. Not a minute sooner. I hung up the phone. I walked over to my polished wet bar, poured myself a neat glass of 20-year-old scotch, and walked back to the window. The machine had been officially activated. There was no stopping it now. At 6 in the morning, the grand, fake illusion my family had built would shatter into a million pieces. The money they stole would be mercilessly exposed to the people they feared most. The wedding of the decade would turn into a spectacular, humiliating disaster. I took a slow sip of the scotch, feeling the warm burn slide down my throat. I looked at the clock. Midnight. 6 hours to go. I sat down in my leather armchair, swirling the amber liquid in my glass. I wasn't going to sleep a wink tonight. I was going to enjoy every single second of the countdown. What will happen when the sun finally rises and the brutal truth finally comes to light? Thank you for watching this far. Please comment, "I'm Win," to let me know you're a great viewer. I'll like and reply to every comment containing the keyword "I'm Win." The glowing digital clock resting on my sleek nightstand flipped from 5:59 to exactly 6 in the morning. I had not slept a single minute, yet my eyes were wide open. I sat in the dim, cool light of my living room, watching the gray dawn slowly creep over the Seattle skyline, casting long shadows across the hardwood floor. Across the city, an automated server buried deep within the Gallagher Logistics secure network silently executed its pre-programmed command. A sterile, legally binding email was dispatched simultaneously to the third-party wedding planner and blind copied directly to Preston, the groom's ruthless financial attorney. The subject line was simple, devoid of any warmth or pleasantries. Urgent notice of immediate cancellation due to breach of contract and financial misconduct. At that exact, precise moment, miles away at the Glass House Conservatory, a fleet of 6 heavy-duty commercial transport trucks rumbled into the main loading bay. The heavy diesel engines cut through the quiet, misty morning air like a chainsaw. The logistics crew chief stepped out of the lead vehicle, holding a heavy metal clipboard containing my direct, irreversible orders. He blew a sharp silver whistle, and 30 experienced, highly trained crew members swarmed into the grand hall. They were not there to set up a magical, fairy tale day for a blushing bride. They were there to systematically dismantle a massive lie. The Grand Hall was a stunning masterpiece of modern event design, a testament to what unlimited budget and exquisite taste could achieve. Massive crystal chandeliers hung from the dark steel rafters, catching the early morning light and scattering rainbows across the floor. The $20,000 worth of rare, imported white orchids were meticulously arranged on every single guest table, climbing up the sheer glass walls in a breathtaking, cascading display of wealth. It was undeniably beautiful. And it was all coming down immediately. The crew moved with ruthless, synchronized military precision. The delicate orchids were carefully unpinned from their trellises, boxed up in climate-controlled containers, and loaded onto the idling trucks, destined for a dining hall full of orphans who would actually appreciate their beauty. The pristine, hand-pressed white silk table linens were stripped away in seconds, exposing the bare, utilitarian wooden tables beneath. The custom silver cutlery, the fragile crystal champagne flutes, the expensive gold-rimmed dinner plates, all of it vanished rapidly into padded transport crates. Meanwhile, the catering crew marched into the massive, state-of-the-art industrial kitchens and began aggressively packing up hundreds of pounds of premium, dry-aged filet mignon, fresh wild-caught lobster tails, and imported artisan cheeses. They drained the deep fryers. They shut off the massive convection ovens. They unplugged the walk-in refrigerators and plunged the entire kitchen area into pitch-black darkness. Within 90 short minutes, the bustling, magical wedding venue was transformed back into an empty, echoing, lifeless cavern of cold glass and bare steel. The crew chief locked the massive double front doors, pulled down the heavy steel security gates, and aggressively taped 3 bright red, professionally laminated signs directly to the front glass. Event cancelled. No entry. Trespassers will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. He locked the perimeter gates with a heavy padlock and drove away, leaving behind a silent, empty shell. On the exact opposite side of town, in a sprawling, massively overpriced luxury hotel bridal suite, my younger sister Delaney was just waking up. She stretched lazily in the massive king-sized bed, wearing expensive silk pajamas, firmly believing she was mere hours away from becoming the center of the universe. Room service arrived right on schedule with a polished silver tray containing fresh, warm French pastries, exotic fruits, and a crystal carafe of mimosas. She sat up, fluffed her down pillows, and eagerly reached for her phone to check her social media notifications, desperate to see how many people were fawning over her lavish, carefully curated influencer lifestyle. Instead of a flood of Instagram likes and flattering comments, her glowing screen was filled with frantic, terrifying text messages from her wedding planner. Delaney frowned deeply, thoroughly annoyed that someone was daring to disturb her peaceful, perfect morning. She lazily opened the message thread. The healthy, tanned color instantly drained from her face, leaving her looking like a porcelain doll. The wedding planner's texts were a chaotic, terrifying mess of typos, capitalization, and pure, unfiltered panic. The venue canceled. They cited financial fraud and embezzlement. Delaney, what did you do? The doors are chained shut. The food is gone. Every single flower is gone. Preston is calling my personal cell phone demanding answers right now. Where's the remaining $50,000? You told me it was in the escrow account. Call me right this second or I am calling the police. Delaney let out a choked gasp and dropped her phone. It bounced off the thick hotel mattress and clattered loudly onto the hardwood floor. Her heart began to pound a frantic, terrifying, painful rhythm against her ribs. Her perfect, manicured nails dug into her palms. She scrambled frantically out of bed, knocking over the silver room service tray. The crystal glass shattered, spilling mimosa across the expensive rug. Her hands were shaking violently as she picked up the device and dialed my mother's room down the hall. When Daphne answered the phone, she was already entirely hysterical, screaming into the receiver so loudly the speaker cracked. The terrified planner had forwarded the brutal cancellation notice directly to my father's email. They knew. The venue administration knew about the missing money, and now the groom's terrifying lawyer knew too. The carefully constructed, fragile house of cards they had built on stolen funds and arrogant entitlement was collapsing right on top of their heads, burying them alive in the heavy rubble of their own deceit. They had tried to play a dangerous, incredibly stupid game of extortion with the wrong person, assuming I was still the weak, pathetic girl they could easily bully. Now they had lost everything. But the true, devastating horror of their situation had not even begun to dawn on them yet. They still had no idea who was pulling the strings. How long would it take for their frantic panic to turn into sheer, undeniable, suffocating despair? I finally forced myself to get up out of my leather armchair at 8 in the morning. Surprisingly, I felt strangely energized, fueled by a potent, intoxicating mixture of adrenaline and righteous, long overdue justice. I walked into my sprawling, pristine kitchen, ground some fresh, expensive espresso beans, and made myself a rich, dark cup of coffee. The deep, roasted aroma filled the entire penthouse, warm and inviting, providing a stark, beautiful contrast to the utter destruction I had just unleashed across the city. I picked up my phone from the marble counter and finally turned the screen back on. The device practically vibrated right out of my hand as a massive, unending wave of notifications flooded in. 65 missed calls. 40 unopened text messages. 3 voicemails. The screen was a chaotic, blinking wall of pure desperation. My father had called 20 times in the span of an hour. My mother had called 15 times. Delaney had called 10 times, leaving voicemails consisting of nothing but hyperventilating sobs. The rest were from Aunt Gemma and a few other extended flying monkeys who had undoubtedly been hastily recruited to bully me into submission. I leisurely scrolled through the text messages, sipping my hot espresso, reading their panic like I was reading the Sunday morning newspaper. At 6:30, my father's texts were still full of furious, arrogant commands. Answer the phone, Sloan. The venue is trying to cancel our contract due to a banking error. We need the money wired right now. Pick up the phone before I come over there. By 7:15, the aggressive tone shifted drastically to frantic, terrified pleading. Please, Sloan. This is a massive emergency. They locked the doors and put up trespass signs. The Carter family is going to find out the money is gone. Pick up the phone, we are begging you. You have to help your sister. Then came the predictable, venomous messages from Aunt Gemma. You selfish, spiteful little monster. How could you refuse to help your own family in their darkest hour of need? You are intentionally ruining your sister's life because you are deeply jealous of her success and her rich fiancé. You disgust me. You are a terrible daughter. I smiled, setting the phone down on the cool marble island. They still genuinely thought this was solely about my refusal to pay their $50,000 ransom. They still thought they were the tragic victims of bad luck, a strict corporate policy, and a cruel, uncooperative daughter. They had not yet connected the dots. They had not realized that the sharp, heavy guillotine currently hanging over their necks belonged entirely to me. I walked into my massive, custom-built walk-in closet. Today was undeniably not a day for blending into the background. Today was a day for making a definitive, unforgettable statement. I bypassed my standard, comfortable casual wear and went straight for a very specific garment I had custom-tailored in Milan last year. It was a $5,000, razor-sharp, charcoal gray power suit. The cut was immaculate, designed to project unyielding authority and terrifying strength. I paired it with a crisp, bone-white silk blouse and a pair of black stiletto heels that echoed like gunshots on the hardwood floor. I pulled my hair back into a sleek, severe, flawless twist, applied minimal makeup to maintain a cold exterior, and slid on a pair of dark, oversized designer sunglasses. I looked at my reflection in the full-length mirror. The vulnerable, eager-to-please laundry lady was dead and buried. The CEO of Gallagher Logistics stared back at me, heavily armed and ready for war. I took the private, secure elevator down to the underground garage and slid into the soft leather driver's seat of my Porsche Panamera. The massive engine roared to life with a deep, satisfying growl that vibrated through my chest. I pulled out onto the city streets, navigating the morning traffic with cool, detached, surgical precision. The drive to the glass house took exactly 20 minutes, and every single second built the sweet anticipation in my chest. When I finally pulled onto the sweeping, meticulously manicured driveway of the venue, the scene unfolding in front of me was exactly as chaotic and pathetic as I had pictured. Several expensive cars were haphazardly parked near the locked front gates. My parents, Delaney, Aunt Gemma, and the frantic wedding planner were huddled together on the pavement, looking exactly like a group of wealthy, displaced refugees. Delaney was still wearing her casual silk pajamas, sobbing uncontrollably into her hands, her perfect hair a tangled mess, her makeup smeared down her cheeks. My father was bright red in the face, violently shaking the heavy metal handles of the locked glass doors, screaming profanities at the two stoic, massive security guards standing silently on the other side of the glass. I parked the Porsche a few yards away, the engine purring softly as I shifted the gear into park. I did not get out immediately. I sat there in the air-conditioned, soundproof cabin, watching them unravel. This was the family that had mocked my ambition for decades. This was the family that had threatened to banish me over their own criminal thievery. My father turned around, his chest heaving, his tie loosened, and immediately spotted my car. He recognized the sleek lines of the Porsche. He broke away from the doors and stormed towards my vehicle, his face twisted in a terrifying mask of pure, unadulterated rage, marching across the pavement like a man marching to an execution. He genuinely thought I had shown up just to gloat about being denied entry. He thought I was there to rub my lack of $50,000 in his face while his world burned. He raised his heavy fist, ready to bang violently on my expensive hood. What will happen when he realizes he is marching right into the open jaws of the very monster he created? I turned off the engine, pushed the heavy car door open, and stepped out onto the pavement. My stilettos clicked sharply and rhythmically against the concrete, cutting right through the pathetic sound of Delaney's loud, dramatic sobbing. My father stopped a few feet away from me, his face practically purple with unchecked rage, a vein pulsing visibly in his forehead. "You," he spat, pointing a trembling, accusatory finger right at my face. "You came here to laugh at us, didn't you? You useless, spiteful little rat. You flat out refused to help your own flesh and blood, and now the venue is pulling some illegal, insane stunt, locking us out on the day of the wedding. We are going to sue this terrible company into bankruptcy, and I am going to make sure you never step foot in our house again. Get back in your car and get out of my sight before I do something I regret." My mother, Daphne, scurried over, her eyes starting nervously around the empty parking lot, terrified of who might be watching their public meltdown. "Sloane, if you have any shred of decency left in your cold, selfish heart, you will leave right now. We are dealing with a massive, unprecedented crisis. The Carters will be here any minute for the final walkthrough, and we are locked out. Do not make this worse with your toxic presence." I stood there, perfectly still, looking at them from behind the dark lenses of my sunglasses. I did not flinch. I did not argue. I did not raise my voice. I just let them speak their poison, letting them dig their own graves a little deeper. Behind them, a sleek, black, chauffeur-driven town car pulled smoothly into the driveway, parking neatly next to my parents' chaotic SUV. The heavy doors opened, and two men stepped out onto the pavement. One was Carter, the groom, looking incredibly confused, wearing a tailored suit and holding a garment bag. The other was Preston, the intimidating, silver-haired financial lawyer, tightly gripping a thick leather briefcase. The executioners had officially arrived. My father panicked instantly. He turned his back on me to run toward Preston, forcing a fake, terrified, desperately eager smile onto his sweating face. "Preston. Carter. Thank God you are here." "There is a huge, ridiculous misunderstanding," my father stammered, waving his hands. "The venue management is trying to extort us. They locked the doors and canceled the event this morning without any valid reason. It is a shakedown. We are calling the police right now to sort this out." Preston ignored my father entirely. The lawyer adjusted his glasses and looked right past him, his sharp eyes landing directly on me. He gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod of acknowledgement. Before my father could say another frantic word, the heavy magnetic locks on the front doors of the glass house clicked loudly, the sound echoing across the parking lot. The massive glass doors swung open. Quinn, my general coordinator, stepped out into the morning air, flanked by 4 burly, highly trained security guards in tailored black suits. She held a thick, heavy corporate binder in her hands. My father spun around, pointing an angry finger at Quinn. "You! Who is your manager? I demand to speak to the owner of this establishment right this second. I am going to have your job for this outrage." Quinn did not even look at him. She walked straight past my screaming father, straight past my sobbing sister, and stopped right in front of me. She bowed her head slightly in a gesture of profound, undeniable professional respect. "Good morning, boss," Quinn said, her voice carrying clearly across the silent, tense parking lot. "The venue has been entirely secured. The flowers, equipment, and food have been successfully rerouted to the orphanage, per your direct orders. All vendor contracts for this client have been officially voided under Section 4 due to evidence of financial fraud." The silence that fell over the group was so heavy it felt tangible. It was a suffocating, paralyzing, terrifying quiet. The only sound was the distant hum of traffic. My father's mouth fell wide open, his jaw practically hitting the pavement. He looked from Quinn to the massive security guards and finally, slowly, back to me. The angry purple color drained entirely from his face, replaced by a sickly, chalky white. My mother gasped, a sharp, choked sound of pure terror, and the fake Hermes bag she was clutching slipped from her trembling fingers, hitting the concrete with a dull thud. Delaney stopped crying instantly, her eyes wide with uncomprehending, shattered horror. I reached out and took the heavy binder from Quinn's hands. I walked over to the hood of my father's car and tossed the binder onto the metal. It landed with a heavy, definitive smack. "You demanded to speak to the owner," I said, my voice cold, calm, and ringing with undeniable authority. I reached up and pulled off my sunglasses, looking my father dead in the eyes. "Hello, Harrison. Everything you see here, from the steel beams holding up the roof, to the imported glass walls, down to the very concrete you are standing on, belongs to me. The luxury catering company belongs to me. The floral design firm belongs to me. You tried to extort $50,000 from the laundry lady to cover your own pathetic crimes, without realizing the laundry lady owns the entire city block." I turned away from his stunned face and looked at Preston, who was watching the incredible scene unfold with grim, professional satisfaction. I reached into my designer bag, pulled out a thick manila envelope, and handed it directly to the lawyer. "Mr. Preston, as requested earlier this morning, here are the final audit records from the venue, along with the raw escrow transfer logs," I stated clearly, ensuring everyone heard every single word. They clearly show that only $100,000 was transferred to the venue. The remaining $50,000, provided by the Carter family in good faith, was illegally diverted to personal checking accounts managed by Harrison and Daphne Gallagher to pay off Delaney Gallagher's massive credit card debt. Carter stepped forward, snatching a piece of paper from the envelope in Preston's hands. He read the highlighted bank transfer logs. His handsome face contorted in profound disgust. He looked up at Delaney, who was now trembling so violently she looked like she might physically shatter into pieces. How will the golden child survive when her stolen crown is finally ripped from her head in front of everyone she wanted to impress? Carter stared intently at the financial documents in his hands, his eyes scanning the undeniable, black and white proof of embezzlement. The silence stretched thin, vibrating with incredible tension, until it finally snapped like a dry twig. "You stole from my family," Carter said, his voice terrifyingly quiet, devoid of the love and adoration he usually reserved for my sister. He dropped the papers onto the hood of the car, stepping away from Delaney as if she were carrying a highly contagious disease. Delaney lunged forward, desperately grabbing his arm, her voice shrill and broken with panic. "Carter, no. Please, you have to listen to me. It is a huge mistake. Sloan is lying. She fabricated those documents. She is doing this to ruin my life because she is insanely jealous of us. We were going to pay it back, I swear on my life. We just needed a little more time to move some investment funds around. Please don't leave me." Carter violently ripped his arm out of her frantic grasp. "Pay it back? You used my father's wedding money to pay off your ridiculous luxury shopping debts, and then you tried to extort your own sister to cover it up hours before the ceremony? You are a liar, Delaney. You are a manipulator. And infinitely worse, you are a common thief. He took another step back, shaking his head in profound, sickening disgust. The wedding is officially off. I would rather be single for the rest of my natural life than marry into a family of deceitful, toxic criminals. He turned on his heel, signaling sharply to Preston. Without another backward glance, they both walked briskly back to their waiting town car. The heavy doors slammed shut, echoing across the lot, and the vehicle sped out of the driveway, taking Delaney's entire future, her elevated social status, and her stolen dreams with it. Delaney collapsed onto the hard pavement in a heap of expensive silk, wailing in a high pitch that made my ears physically ring. But the dominoes were just beginning to fall. Aunt Gemma, who had been standing entirely frozen in shock near her car, suddenly realized the immense gravity of the situation. The ultimate flying monkey recognized that the ship was sinking rapidly, taking on massive amounts of water, and she needed to save herself before she drowned with them. She turned on my parents, her face twisted in aggressive, hypocritical indignation. You stole $50,000 from the Carters? Are you clinically insane? Gemma shrieked, marching forward and pointing her manicured finger directly at my mother's face. You lied to all of us. You sat at my dining table and told us Sloane was just being a selfish, jealous brat who refused to contribute. You made me insult her. You are humiliating this entire family, Daphne. You are disgusting, pathetic frauds, and I want absolutely nothing to do with you ever again. Gemma turned, power walking to her own car, desperately trying to distance herself from the radioactive fallout. The immense social pressure, the very thing my parents worshipped above all else, was now turning around to crush them flat into the pavement. My father was hyperventilating, loosening his expensive silk tie, his eyes darting frantically between me, the massive security guards, and the departing cars. He realized, with terrifying, crystal clarity, the immense legal peril they were currently standing in. They had committed grand larceny against a powerful, incredibly wealthy family with a team of lawyers. Preston would undoubtedly have the police knocking at their front door by noon. His knees buckled. He fell to his knees on the hard concrete, right in front of me. My mother followed instantly, weeping openly, her expensive mascara running down her face in ugly, dark black streaks. Sloane, my father gasped, holding his hands out in a gesture of pathetic, desperate begging. All his deeply ingrained arrogance, all his condescending cruelty, vanished into thin air, replaced by raw, primal, animalistic fear. Sloane, please. You have to help us. The Carters are going to press formal charges. Preston will destroy us in a court of law. We will go to federal prison. We will lose everything we have ever worked for. Please, you own this massive company. You have millions of dollars. $50,000 is pocket change to you. Just advance us the money. Give us the money so we can wire it back to the Carters before they go to the police station. Please, Sloane. Have mercy. We are your parents. I looked down at them, kneeling pathetically at my feet on the pavement of my own property. For 3 decades, they had stomped on my heart, relentlessly ridiculed my hard work, and treated me like disposable trash. And now they were begging the laundry lady to save them from a cold prison cell. I searched myself, expecting to feel a shred of pity. I felt nothing. I felt no sorrow. I felt a cold, calculating, undeniable sense of profound justice. Will I let the authorities drag them away in handcuffs, or do I have a much more fitting, permanent punishment designed just for them? I took a slow, incredibly deliberate step forward, my shadow falling directly across their trembling, kneeling forms. The air in the parking lot was thick and suffocating with their sheer desperation. They were holding their breath, waiting for me to show the familiar weakness they had always relentlessly exploited. They were waiting for the desperate, eager to please daughter to finally cave and buy their affection with a massive check. You want me to save you, I said, my voice steady, cold, echoing ominously off the glass walls of my venue. You want me to simply hand over $50,000 in cash to clean up the catastrophic mess you made when you decided to steal from a family that actually trusted you? Yes, my mother sobbed, reaching out a shaking hand to touch the hem of my tailored trousers. I took a sharp step back, avoiding her touch like it was venom. Please, Sloane. We will do anything you want. We are so incredibly sorry. We were just so stressed about the wedding costs. We made a terrible, stupid mistake. You have to protect your family. Family, I repeated, tasting the deeply bitter irony of the word on my tongue. Yesterday evening, you told me I served no purpose to you. You told me I was entirely worthless unless I handed over cash on demand. You told me to disappear. And now, facing prison time, you expect me to act like a loyal, loving daughter. I looked over at Delaney, who was still sitting on the ground, staring blankly into space, her perfect, curated life entirely in ruins. Then I looked back down at Harrison and Daphne. I will not give you $50,000, I stated clearly, enunciating every syllable. My father let out a choked, guttural cry of pure despair, burying his face in his hands. However, I continued, holding up a single finger, silencing his crying instantly. I am a businesswoman, and I am willing to offer you a financial lifeline. I will lend you the $50,000 today, but it will not be a gift. It will not be a favor. It will be a transaction. I signaled to Quinn without looking away from them. She immediately opened her leather corporate portfolio and pulled out a thick stack of heavily watermarked legal documents, handing them directly to me. This is a legally binding, high-interest loan agreement, drafted specifically for this occasion by my corporate legal team, I explained, dropping the heavy stack of papers onto the ground right in front of their knees. The interest rate is set at the absolute maximum legal limit allowed by the state of Washington. And, because you are proven, documented thieves with terrible financial judgment, I require substantial, undeniable collateral. My father looked at the thick stack of papers, his hands shaking violently as he hovered over them. Collateral? What collateral? We don't have $50,000 in liquid assets to give you right now. You know that. I smiled, a cold, predatory, shark-like grin that did not reach my eyes. You have a house, Harrison. The sprawling, 5-bedroom suburban McMansion you love to show off to Aunt Gemma and your snooty country club friends. According to public county records, you finally paid off the mortgage last year. This contract explicitly lists your home as the sole collateral for this emergency loan. You will sign over the deed to my company as security. If you miss a single monthly payment, if you are late by even one single minute, my company will legally foreclose on the property and evict you within 30 days. No grace periods. No extensions. My mother gasped, covering her mouth in pure, unadulterated horror. Sloane, you can't be serious. You want to hold our family home hostage? You would throw your own parents out on the street over a missed payment. You threatened to throw me out of this family for $50,000 just last night, I reminded her coldly, my voice devoid of mercy. This is strictly business. You sign this contract right now, right here on the hood of your car, in front of my security detail who will act as legal witnesses. If you do, I will wire the money to Preston's trust account immediately to call off the police. Or you can refuse, and I will stand right here and watch the authorities arrive to arrest you for grand larceny. The choice is entirely yours. The power dynamic had shifted so violently, so permanently, it was almost dizzying. I was no longer the victim. I was the warden. I held the heavy iron keys to their future, their reputation, and the roof over their heads. My father stared at the legal documents, his chest heaving as he struggled to breathe. He looked at the locked, impenetrable doors of the venue, then at the empty road where Carter had vanished. He had zero leverage left. He was trapped. He picked up the expensive pen Quinn offered him with a trembling hand, tears of supreme, crushing humiliation falling onto the legal paper as he signed away his safety and his pride. My mother signed next, sobbing uncontrollably, her hand shaking so badly she could barely form the letters. I picked up the signed documents, carefully checking the signatures to ensure they were valid. I nodded firmly to Quinn, who immediately tapped her tablet, authorizing the massive wire transfer. "The money is sent," I said, looking down at them one last time, feeling lighter than I had in 30 years. "You are safe from the police. But hear me clearly. From this day forward, the massive monthly interest payment you send me will serve as a constant, painful reminder that you live entirely under my mercy. Do not call me. Do not text me. Do not ask for favors. If you ever speak a single insulting word about me again, I will take your house and I will sell it for scrap." I turned around, my heels clicking on the pavement, walking back to my Porsche. How does it feel to finally break the toxic cycle of abuse and walk away with everything? That same afternoon, the atmosphere downtown was the exact, beautiful opposite of the toxic, agonizing wasteland I had left behind in the venue parking lot. The downtown community center, usually a drab, utilitarian space used for town hall meetings, had been utterly and magically transformed. The $20,000 worth of imported white orchids climbed the cheap brick walls, turning the large room into a breathtaking, fragrant indoor garden. The air smelled heavenly, a rich mixture of expensive roasting meats, garlic butter, and sweet pastries. I stood near the back of the room, holding a simple plastic cup of sparkling cider, quietly watching 50 children from the local orphanage experience the kind of extravagant luxury they had only ever seen in movies. They were laughing loudly, running joyfully around the tables, their faces happily smeared with premium Belgian chocolate from the towering dessert fountain my catering staff had quickly set up. It was chaotic, loud, and profoundly beautiful. My fiancé, David, stood right beside me. He wrapped a warm, incredibly supportive arm around my waist, pulling me close to his side. He knew everything that had happened that morning. He knew about the extortion, the cancellation, and the brutal contract I had forced my parents to sign. He didn't judge me, he just held me tighter, offering the kind of quiet, steady, unwavering love I had spent my entire life hopelessly searching for in the wrong places. Uncle Beckett walked over to us, holding a paper plate piled high with dry-aged filet mignon and creamy garlic mashed potatoes. He looked around the vibrant, happy room, a broad, genuine smile crinkling the corners of his tired, kind eyes. "You did good, kid," Uncle Beckett said, raising his plastic cup of water toward me in a silent, meaningful toast. "You took something incredibly ugly and rotten, and you turned it into something profoundly beautiful for people who actually deserve a good day." I smiled back, clinking my plastic cup against his. "Thanks, Uncle Beckett. It feels right. It feels like the first right thing I have done regarding them in years." As I watched the kids playing, I felt a deep, permanent settling peace wash over my soul, anchoring me. I realized, with absolute clarity, that blood means nothing if it is not paired with respect, loyalty, and basic human decency. My parents and Delaney shared my DNA, but they were never my family. They were just deeply flawed people who happened to live in the same house as me, constantly extracting my energy and my sanity to fuel their own fragile egos. I had spent my entire youth desperately trying to buy a ticket into their exclusive, cruel club, constantly contorting myself to fit their impossible, ever-changing standards. I had endured the bitter insults, the harsh dismissals, and the cruel nicknames. I had let them call me the laundry lady, silently hoping that one day they would open their eyes and see the successful entrepreneur hiding underneath. But I finally understood that you cannot negotiate with toxic people. You cannot love them into respecting you. The Thursday kong ko nia la cho fep nuoi kok cha dap min lon nua. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to build an impenetrable fortress and firmly lock them outside in the cold. My parents were now tied to me by a heavy, unbreakable chain of financial debt. They would spend the next decade writing me a massive check every single month, terrified of missing a payment, terrified of the daughter they had spent a lifetime treating like dirt. Delaney had lost her wealthy fiancé, her pristine, fake reputation, and the lavish lifestyle she thought she was inherently entitled to. They had built their own miserable prison of greed and deceit, and I had simply handed them the heavy iron keys to lock themselves inside. I looked up at David, the man who represented my real, chosen family, and smiled. The crushing, suffocating burden I had carried for 30 years was finally gone. I was light. I was undeniably free. I want to turn this over to you, the incredible people listening to my story today. I know my actions were extreme. I know that forcing my own parents to sign over the deed to their family home under the direct threat of prison is a ruthless, undeniably cold-blooded move. There are people out there, maybe even some of my own extended relatives who don't know the whole story, who would call me a monster. They would passionately argue that I was too vindictive, that I should have just walked away and let them face the legal consequences on their own without taking their home as collateral. But then I remember the 24-year-old girl crying and begging for a simple loan in their kitchen. I remember the decades of cruelty, the constant mockery, and the $50,000 ransom they demanded just to let me attend a family wedding. I remember that they were entirely willing to let me take the emotional fall for their criminal theft. So, I have to ask you, the jury of the internet, was I too cruel? Did I cross a moral line by taking their house as collateral, or was it the exact, perfect dose of karma they deserved for a lifetime of abuse and a final, unforgivable act of extortion? If you were in my shoes, holding all the power, all the money, and all the evidence, what would you have done? Thank you for taking the time to listen to my story. If you've ever been the invisible child in your family or ever faced toxic relatives, please leave a comment sharing your thoughts below. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next dramatic stories.